In 1887, 10 acres of Crown land was set aside for the use of burials in Trafalgar, Victoria, Australia. The views from this patch of land, situated up on the hill adjacent to the Princes Highway, are simply beautiful. During the day, there's the hum of the traffic from the highway, mixed with the visual feasts of birds, butterflies and other wildlife, as they visit the area from a vast spread of farmland, dams, hills, mountains, clouds and sky. It makes the place seem peaceful, akin to paradise, or even what we would imagine to be heaven-like. We like to think that our loved ones are there resting peacefully, free of pain, safe from the traumas, trials and tribulations that life often brings. And we acknowledge the thoughts that their bodies are slowly returning to the earth, while their spirits are hopefully joining the afterlife, whatever that may be. No one would have ever thought or known about the darkness that once came upon this cemetery until now. On the 26th of March in 1955, a Maltese migrant who was busy hunting rabbits had discovered a partially buried body in the scrub near the brown coal mine at Yallourn. He wasn't sure if it was animal or human, but after digging around a little, he decided to return later in the day to re-examine the site. When the police arrived, they discovered the body of an elderly woman whose hands were bound together with hospital bandages. The remains were transferred to the morgue, where a worker recognised that the bandages were applied in exactly the same manner that the Warrigal Hospital did when laying out a body for burial. This gave the detectives their first clue as to the identity of the woman. Using this knowledge, they became convinced that the body was not that of a murdered woman, but rather of a person whose body had been snatched from the grave. So the Warrigal Hospital files were searched for a recently buried woman. At around the same time, a letter was sent from Warrigal to D24 in Melbourne, which read, "There is no murder at Yallourn. Open the grave at Trafalgar Cemetery of CC. Coffin is empty. I wanted her bones. Sorry." The words were printed on 2 envelopes, one inside the other. They found a CC, and although her name was misspelled and incorrect, she was the right age, and so the detectives opened the CC's grave to find that the lid of the coffin had been unscrewed and the casket was indeed empty. As far as the public knew, there was no known suspects, but as usual, there were rumours. The dissatisfied public were being fed trickles of information, and when this happens, they tend to fill in the gaps themselves with imagination. Even as I searched for the truth, I could not find very much on the subject of grave robbing in the area. There were a few small newspaper clippings saying that various cemeteries in the district had mentioned tampering with graves, such as flowers removed, trinkets taken, glass vases smashed, things like that but I couldn't find much else. Now here's where my story gets interesting. A few months back in 2022, I told Mum and I had just come back from filming at Trafalgar Cemetery. I was surprised to see my mum give a kind of grimace and a shiver as she turned around. My mum is normally impervious to anything remotely weird or spooky. We asked, and she made mention of a case years ago where she was working at the police station. We didn't get to talk about it there and then because it was already a very late night. So, here's the story. Back in 1961, Mum was a deposition typist, typing court proceeding records. She was the fastest typist in the state of Victoria, typing 125 words per minute, and she was only 16 years old. She was transferred to the Moe police station as a secretarial assistant. In 1961, when the police received word of the death of a suspect in a case where the body was removed from Trafalgar Cemetery in 1955, they came across the tape in the man's possessions, and it was the confession that they'd been looking for. There was an urgency to transcribe these recordings. It had already been 6 years, and a tape can perish quickly due to atmosphere, mishandling, or storing incorrectly. There was also the problem of procedures. If it had gone down to Melbourne headquarters, it could have taken weeks, months, or sometimes even years before the matter could be handled. Meanwhile, the tape might have deteriorated and rotted away. So on hearing that they had someone local who could quickly and efficiently transcribe the tapes, 2 detectives borrowed Mum. The detectives would often talk together within earshot of my mum about the case. They found out that the man hung around the local high school in Yallourn and would often talk to young girls and try to lure them to his hut. Neighbours would complain about terrible smells coming from the man's car and the hut, and that the man himself sometimes smelled putrid. The detectives made mention of pulling the suspect over on 2 occasions, and they searched his car. In the boot and the back seat, they found maggots squirming around in patches of dirt. When questioned about the state of his car, the suspect would tell them that he collected manure for a friend who would put it on their garden. Mum recalls that part of his confession on the tape had stated that the suspect, who we will call Mr. R, would check the obituaries in the local paper, and he'd watch for young girls that were to be buried. Mr. R would then go out and look for the freshly dug grave, and in the darkness he would dig out the body, to which he took to various locations to perform acts of necrophilia. In the tape, he is believed to have voiced his bitter disappointment and his guilt in regards to the old woman from the Trafalgar Cemetery. Mr. R claimed the advert in the obituary said Miss CC as the title for the recently deceased. He didn't bother to read anything more of the ad. He just hastily set off to the cemetery, ready to dig up the body. He dug her up thinking it was a young girl, only to find in the morning light it was clearly a 73-year-old woman. He felt cheated by this, and he needed to confess to his tape recorder. He said he couldn't help the way he was, and that he knew he wasn't right in the head. His excuse, he said, was that his mother had dropped him on his head as a baby. Yes, it's a true story, and the reason it never got to court was the suspect died, and they believed there wasn't enough evidence to please the court, even though the man gave this confession on tape. Mum was part of the police system, and they could not discuss any delicate matters outside of the station. She held on to the secret for years. The most horrific part, I feel, was the fact that she was only a 16-year-old girl having to deal with that information. And although she might have been very mature for her age, that event would have caused some trauma. Mum, being the strong person, said that it was just part of the job, but she admits that at times it made her feel very ill and concerned. But she says she feels a little better now, being able to voice those secrets and let others know the real truth of what was happening behind the scenes during the police investigation. All things covered are eventually laid bare. No secret can remain protected from the truth.
I was picked up from the Murray police station and taken to the work area at Geelong, and there was a public hall there where they used to have concerts and what have you. They had the tape recorder up on the stage, and they had a chair and a small card table thing set up for me to do my shorthand. At times he was too slow for me, this is the tape recorder, and other times he was too fast. So we had lots of times where I had to wind the tape back a bit so that I could catch what he was saying and accent and all that sort of thing a little bit. And the tape went on for quite a long time. Like, we probably arrived about 10 a.m. in the morning, and somebody went off and got lunch for us, and we were there to maybe mid-afternoon, and I was working flat out with that all the time. And when I went back to the station, being determined like I was, I sat down at my typewriter and started to transcribe it straight away, because I knew that they were anxiously awaiting it.
When you worked at the Murray police station, why was it that they were investigating those files?
He died,
right.
and they discovered a tape. And they started to play the tape, and they got about half an hour into it, because it was about a 3-hour tape. And they realised that there was no way they could document it, and like tape recorders or recorders weren't used in the law department or the police department at that stage. It was considered that it might go against them.
As in dismissible evidence?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So everything had to be on paper.
Right.
And there was nobody that they knew of that could do that sort of work for them, except if they had have called on Melbourne. And if they called on Melbourne, they'd have a wait of about 3-4 months before it was approved by the Chief Commissioner and by the Crown Law Department and this and the that and the other. So they said to Sergeant, "You've got a girl that's really fast with typing and she knows her shorthand. Can we have a loan of her, please?" Because at that stage I was anybody's property. That was, you know what I mean? I wasn't officially a member of the police department probably until late 1961.
Was there any thoughts about other places having been robbed of?
Oh yes, there were other grave sites, and he mentions, but I can't remember where he said they were. Your lawn would have to be one of them.